Hello Flip Noise users. Today we're going to be looking at Ableton's drum rack and how to drop drum samples in, edit those samples and use a GM mapping system so that ringtones, MIDI files will play the correct drum sounds. First thing we're going to do is create a MIDI track by right clicking in the grey area at the top and inserting the MIDI clip. MIDI track, sorry. Also there's a command shortcut there, okay, and we're going to delete the audio track. If you've got various other sends and returns set up, you could simplify the screen by using this area here. I've got my metronome that should be working. Remember the volume control for that is just here, and yes, so I'm going to look for my drum rack. So I'm going to go to instruments, go down, find my drum rack. I'm not interested in the presets here. I just want an empty drum rack. Okay, so I've armed the track, and you'll notice there's no sounds in there. It won't produce a sound until I actually start filling this rack up with drum hits. So first thing I'm going to do is look for a kick drum. So I'm going to go to my search and I'm going to type in kick, and then I'm going to go down to my samples, and indeed we've got various kicks that we could audition here, and I'm just going to go down. Yeah, I'm just going to load a kick drum. Notice it's going in C1, which is the general MIDI mapping for kick drum. A couple of things you can do. First thing is adjust the start of it. Okay, and I've got the volume control to get a nice volume for the kit, and then as you can see there's a little bit at the start of there. You can zoom in if you wanted to, and you can get a more accurate start for the kick. Too far and you'll miss the attack of the transient. You can see the attack of it there, and something like that should do. Okay, likewise at the end you can minimize it using your magnifying glass, and I can go to the end. Any reverb you could cut off, but I'm going to go with that at the moment. And the next thing you could do is, well, let's just load a snare drum now, and then we'll start to edit them. So I'm going to type in snare. I'm going to get that snare and I'm going to drop it into D1. Okay, now then, let's listen to the kick and the snare. Okay, if you want to adjust the volumes of these, I'm going to bring my kick down a little bit. I could bring it down just here. Notice when I go to the snare, that's untouched, it's still -12. Okay, and I'll just test those out. Okay, so they're working good. One thing I would do, this velocity underneath the volume, notice what that does. With it to 0, even if I press the key lightly, okay, and heavy, lightly, heavy, it's exactly the same. If I go to 100% and do the same thing, lightly and then heavy, it's velocity sensitive, so you might want to adjust that to make sure that you can groove the drums with velocity. Otherwise it'll sound too much like a drum machine probably. It might be the effect you want, in which case bring it to 0. Okay, a couple of other things. We'll have a look around here. Okay, this is the editing, and you've got your macros. We've discussed those in the making a bassline tutorial, and this one is just a list of the actual hits that we're putting into the drum rack. Okay, so if I click on these, you'll notice that the editing changes, and likewise if I press the keys, it automatically changes, which is really useful, but you have to be careful that you're editing the right one. For example, I'm editing the snare at the moment, and now it changes to a kick. My point is, you want to make sure you're editing the right one by clicking on and making it blue. I just want to show you these envelopes here. Okay, first of all, the volume envelope. Now, if you're familiar with envelopes, you'll know you've got attack, decay, sustain, release. Release is quite important. Let's use a snare for an example. If I take the release off, the snare ends as soon as I lift my finger up. Okay, whereas with the release turned up, it's a more realistic sound. Your drum wouldn't stop, your snare wouldn't stop when you lifted your drumstick off the skin, and likewise you want that to do the same. If you was getting a weird kind of fill effect, you might want to take that release down. But generally speaking, you want to release up on the hits, and likewise the attack, how quickly that sound amplitude rises. You want a nice sharp steep transient there. And these envelopes work exactly the same with filter and pitch as well. They need to be switched on, but not only that, for example, the pitch, and we'll do the pitch to start with, the pitch won't appear to do anything. The shape of that pitch won't change with your envelope, basically because your pitch is just here and you haven't got any envelope on at the moment. It's on naught. So if we turn that up, there you go. So you can see now that the amount of envelope is important there. Likewise, filter won't actually work until you've set your filter up and actually applied the envelope. We've got an LFO on here as well, so you could switch your LFO on and you can either switch it to be in sync with the beats. In this case it's 16ths, but let's put it a little bit less. Okay, and for example, each controller's got an LFO amount to it. So for example, if I put the filter back on and put the LFO up, I might want to bring that down just so you can hear it. So you can see there the LFO amount, it's adding LFO to the filter, and likewise if I wanted to pan, and the rate of the LFO is controlled. We have got a kick, a snare. You'd obviously put your hi-hats and your toms and you'd build it up. You've, just to recap, you've got your filter area, your envelopes. This is quite an interesting stage if you wanted to create like a drum roll on your snare, for example. We'll just switch off our LFO for now and switch off our filter. I'm just going to switch this loop on. It's just the start of the loop and the length. So you could create the flam on the general MIDI slot, and that is it. You could put a bit of glide on. Obviously, if you wanted to tune your snare, we'll take our loop off. You've got your transpose there. Couple of other things. If I wanted to add any effects, audio effects, to my kick or my snare, you could put it on the whole kit, in which case I would go to I would cancel my search. I'd go to my audio effects and I'll choose, say, something like the glue, and I'll drop it in this area at the end. Notice there's two areas, that area there and this area. Okay, this area at the end will add it to the whole kit, so whichever one I press, the compressor's working. If however I wanted to grab a compressor and just put it on the kick, I could drop it either in there, in which case if I click on there you'll see the compressor's there but not on the snare. Okay, and then I would obviously make sure the threshold is at the right level, set my compressor up for a good kick, or likewise if I wanted to put a compressor on I wouldn't put it there if I wanted it on the snare, or there. I'd put it there, which is at the end of the snare chain, like that. So this should be, so we've got two separate compressors there, and this is compressing the whole kit. Also, what I'd probably do there, I've got some hi-hats that I've just put in, and if I wanted a realistic, I wouldn't want the open. I wouldn't want the open one to play at the same time as the closed one. So what you could do is open up your drum hits slots, and also open up this in-out, which brings up this choke menu. So all the hi-hats I'm going to put to a certain choke group. Okay, and what that does, when it senses, it only plays one voice at a time basically, so that rings out quite a lot. But if I also play, it will cut off the open hat and just start playing the new notes that I'm playing. Really useful function. Once I've done all that, I would probably make sure that the kit is realistic. If you hit a kit hard, all the frequencies, it's quite a dynamic frequency response. If you hit it quieter, not as many frequencies. And to gain that effect, you'd switch the filter on. Okay, you would set a filter, maybe not with the resonance, okay, maybe not the envelope. Okay, and this thing called velocity. So to show you this effect, when I hit it quietly, there's a filter on it. When I hit it loud, all the frequencies come through. To demonstrate that, I'm going to pull the velocity, how hard I hit it, down over here on the volume, because then you'll just hear the filter effect that I've put on, and then I'll put this back up in a minute. So that's hitting it quietly, and when I hit it, the velocity hard, all the frequencies are going through. The filter's not coming on, but quietly. And then I'll put the velocity up to make it velocity sensitive as well. Okay, so now we've got, just to recap, we've got a filter that's being triggered velocity sensitive. We've also got a velocity sensitive dynamic amplitude there, and then we've got the choke that was on. I did that by going on the ins and outs there and adjusting the choke group to whichever I wanted. And now finally I've got the a compressor on the full kit, all the hats, all the snares, all the kicks, and then I've got a separate compressor on the kick and the snare. They're just affecting those individual hits. Finally, I'm going to click on the actual drum rack. I'm going to go Command A, which selects all the effects. Okay, I'm going to select that one as well. Select all of them. They're all highlighted now, and then I'm going to group those. Once you've grouped them, I'm going to go to Save, which is the little disc there, and I just need to call it a name. So I'm going to call that Nick's Drum. I might call it Nick's Drum Rack 1. The reason I call it, give it a number, is tomorrow I might make a different one with 808 sounds or something. So and then once you've done that, you can click off there, it will save the sounds with it, and then what you can do is, I'm going to create a new MIDI track, delete the drum kit that I've just made, and you'll see that I can just drop that in. I could drop it in anywhere here actually, but and then I've got my drum kit. I hope this video's helped, and I will see you next time.